As we enter week 9 of the COVID-19 lockdown in New York, I'm thinking about the work of my dear friend Chow Fei. In particular, I'm thinking about her 2006 film, Whose Utopia? She made it while on an artist residency program at a lighting factory in the Pearl River Delta. She interviews hundreds of resident young factory workers, all migrants from the countryside. The workers that she interviews, we see them doing their workaday job, putting filaments in a light bulb, packaging the light bulbs for export to markets all over the world. And then, one by one, we see them transform right there on the factory floors into a dream of what, if they could act out an individuality, if they could act out a fantasy, what would they be? We see a ballerina dancing in the storage space. We see a guitar player acting out his rock and roll fantasy. We see a man doing his Tai Chi movements, making magic in the glum surroundings. How different has globalization become now? I look at this work, which until a few weeks ago felt like an iconic work of our lived time, an iconic work of contemporary art. But now it feels like a relic of the past. It feels like a relic of a period of globalization that is now determined by this historical demarcation pre-COVID. Globalization after COVID means so much else. If you were to come to that factory today and work as a 18-year-old from the countryside, would you be dreaming of growing up as an American rock and roll player or a Western style ballerina? I doubt it. As my friend Phil Tenari told me recently, what has been lost in this trade war of US-China is that America has lost those dreamers in China who once imagined America as a friend beyond the political constraints of its own government, who thought of America as a beacon of moral strength, who thought of America as a beacon of true liberty. What can we show our workers in China now? Very little, I fear. Globalization itself, the promise of it, this neoliberal world machine, this teleological certainty that it would bring wealth and transformation of the largest production of wealth in the history of the world, a creation of a middle class in China whose population would equal the entire population of continental Europe. Where has that led us? Where does that leave us today? And what does utopia mean? It meant something very specific as China was rising, barreling towards the 2008 Olympics that would announce itself on the world stage as having arrived after its 2001 WTO admission, and as it produced the most extravagant performance for the opening and closing ceremonies of any Olympic in the history of the Olympics. As it was approaching that 2008 moment, what did utopia mean? It actually meant something, perhaps. There was an allowance of a fantasy world that still had currency and agency, that could still define an individual person's life wherever you might be, whatever your positionality might have been. But today, what is our positionality? What is our utopia? We are sandwiched between the real world and cyberspace. And through acceleration and diffusion of attention, we accept such changes rapidly. More is less. Everything is a datum and everything performs for data. We critique and dance at the same time. By the time we are about to leave this world, we might feel like we have never lived. Chow Fei, in her recent reflection on Whose Utopia, is calling upon all of us to imagine what utopia can be in the time of COVID. to imagine what a future might be in the time of COVID outside a digital space, outside this new confinement to our digital space. She is calling upon us to dream for real.